really the basis of the shir tonight is to try and find out why we read a Haftarah in Shul on Shabbos to begin with. Now, we know one thing. We know that the Gemara says in Megillah and in other places that Torah reading is from Takanas Ezra. It was instituted by Ezra because, and really it was actually instituted even earlier by Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah says, "Vayelechu shloshes yomim bamidbar v'lo matzu mayim," that the Jews traveled for 3 days in the desert, couldn't find water, and as a result, and water is a metaphor for Torah, and after wandering for 3 days without Torah, you become cranky and you start to complain against Hashem. So Torah reading, clearly, and the formal Torah reading that we do on Shabbos and Monday and Thursday is Takanas Ezra. So that much we know. But the Gemara never mentions the Haftarah reading as being a Takanas Ezra. Do you mind closing the door? Oh, there we go. The Gemara never mentions the Haftarah reading as a Takanas Ezra. We really have no reference as to where this began other than a reference to Haftarah reading in the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is in Maseches Megillah Perek Dalet, where it just happens to just say matter-of-factly that there are certain days when you read a Haftarah and certain days when you don't read a Haftarah, and that's in source number 1. The Mishnah gives like a Zeh HaKlal. The general rule is that Kol sheyesh bo musaf ve'eino Yom Tov. If there's a musaf in the davening, but it's not a Yom Tov, like Rosh Chodesh or Chanukah, no, there's no musaf on Chanukah, Rosh Chodesh or Chol HaMoed, Korin Arba'a, you have 4 aliyahs. B'Yom Tov Chamisha, on Yom Tov you have 5 aliyahs, B'Yom HaKippurim Shisha, and on Yom Kippur you have 6, and B'Shabbos Shiva, and on Shabbos you have 7, Ein Pochsin Mehen Avol Mosifin Aleihen, and then it says Umaftirin B'Navi, and after you have a Torah reading on Shabbos and Yom Tov, you read the Haftarah. Okay? And that's all we have. It's all the entire reference to Haftarah reading in all of Mishnah. Where does it come from? Where does it come from? I'm gonna go over with you tonight, based on just a little research, 4 reasons that the commentaries offer as to why we read a Haftarah, what the origin of the Haftarah reading is. But I just want to point out that the origin is nebulous, and there are certain practices that we have in Klal Yisrael today in Halacha that the origins of why we do it simply were lost to the mists of time. And I believe that this is one of those things, as I'm going to demonstrate shortly. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Pei Daled, which is in Hilchas Shabbos, discusses the Haftarah. There are 2 places in Shulchan Aruch that discuss Haftarah, but the main place discussing Haftarah is in Siman Reish Pei Daled. And the Shulchan Aruch writes as follows: Maftirin b'navi me'inyana shel parsha. That the Haftarah has to be connected in some way to the parsha. In other words, there should be some reference point that connects them to the parsha and the Haftarah thematically. Ve'ein pochasin michaf aleph psukim. There cannot be less than 21 psukim. Anyone know the reason why there cannot be less than 21 psukim?
7 times 3. 7 times 3 psukim each for each other.
Right. So we read the Haftarah to correspond to the Shiva Kruim, to the 7 aliyahs that we give to the Torah reading. The minimum aliyah length is 3 psukim. So we want the Haftarah in some way to model itself after the Torah reading, so we do 21 psukim as a minimum. Okay, even though only one person is reading the Haftarah, but we want it to model in some way the Torah reading. Okay? Ela im kein salik inyana bebatsa mehachi. Unless there's an exception, sometimes a Haftarah can be less than 21 psukim. If you have a full idea that is encapsulated in a section of Navi that is less than 21. Kegon, Olo sechem safu al zivchechem in Yirmiyahu chapter 7. So the Ramah now says, V'dafka b'Shabbos ba'inun chaf alef psukim, gimel pamim l'chol echad min hakruim. And as it would logically follow, the Ramah says, it's only on Shabbos that we need to have 7 times 3, because on Shabbos is when you have 7 aliyahs. Aval b'Yom Tov shekorin hey sagi b'tesvav psukim. But on Yom Tov you only need 5 times 3. So 15 psukim in a Haftarah would suffice. Furthermore, V'lo niskena ha'haftorah rak b'tzibor achar shekaru b'Torah. You may not read a Haftarah unless you've already had a Torah reading, which means, and we'll look at the Tshuva and the Ramban very shortly, what that essentially means is that if for whatever reason you were not able to have a Torah reading, you would not have a Haftarah reading. Okay? Keep that in mind. Aval b'lav hachi asur likros im habracha shelefanei olachareha aval below bracha shari. If you didn't have a Torah reading, you could not read from the Navi with brachos, but you could read from the Navi without brachos. You could have for whatever reason you couldn't have a Torah reading, but you can have an ad hoc Haftarah reading without brachos. That would be fine. We want to take a look and find the earliest sources that we can find. So the first thing we're going to do is just look at the Bach, which is not an early source. The Bach is an Acharon. He's an early Acharon, but he's an Acharon nonetheless. So we're going to look at the Bach and see, he's a commentary on the Torah, the father of the Taz. We're going to find out why this whole basis of Haftarah comes about. And he tells us, "Umaftirin b'navi minyana shel parsha ve'im pochsim michafal psukim kol ze beperek hakorei omeid." He says this is all appears in Maseches Megillah. Ve'hatam mefurish depam echas gazru shmad shelo likros b'Torah. The reason for reciting Haftarah is brought down, mefurash. It's brought down, or it's explained. Doesn't say where it's explained, he just says it's explained. Depam echas gazru shmad shelo likros b'Torah. One day, the Gentile authorities decreed that Jews could not read the Torah anymore publicly. This was a time of Shmad, of religious persecution. V'tiknu likros b'nevim mi'inyana shel parsha. And so what they decided to do was to say, listen, if we can't read the Torah, we'll read a Haftarah that reminds us of the Parshas HaShavua, and that will substitute the Torah reading. You've probably heard this reason before. V'hayukorin b'neviim chaf alaf psukim kemo ilu hayukorin b'Torah chaf alaf psukim gimel l'chol echad mehashiva shekorin b'Torah. And that's why you have to have 21 psukim, because in the absence of 7 aliyahs, of a minimum of 3 psukim each, the Haftarah acts as a surrogate for the Torah reading. V'gam hayu mevarchim anavim shivas brachos kemo ilu hayukorin b'Torah. And there are 7 blessings. If you break down the Haftarah into, now I'm going to challenge you to count how many brachas of the Haftarah there are. So assuming you want to pull out a siddur and you want to look at the Shabbos davening and you want to tell us how many brachas of the Haftarah you count, but for now we're going to take the Bach's words at face value that there are 7 brachas for the Haftarah, and that corresponds to the 7 aliyahs. Okay? Ve'alkein gam la'achar kach shenisbatel hashmad v'korin b'Torah mikol mokom tiknu shahamafter yehikori b'neviim chaf alef psukim. Once the shmad was removed, there was no longer a reason to continue reading from the Navi, but they said, you know what, it served us well all of these years as a surrogate for Torah reading, we'll keep it in there. We'll keep it as part of the regular service. And from now on, even though we have a Torah, we still want people to read 21 psukim minimum of a Haftarah. But they also said, we require that you read the Torah first, because you have to give first preferential honor to the Torah before you give honor to the Navi. Now, of course, that would go without saying. Why is it necessary for us to give honor to the Torah more than the Navi? We all know that Torah is more important than Navi, but that's the point. The point is that that's the reason why you can't read from a Haftarah if you didn't read from the Torah first. Shimlo hayakori b'Torah ela b'Navi umevarich al kriyaso yehikav Torah v'chavod hanavi shaveh. He says, if we hadn't read from the Torah and we would just read from the Navi and make a bracha on it, that would imply that the honor of the Navi is as important as the honor of the Torah. Al kein tzarich sheyehezeh shemafter b'Navi kori b'Torah techila. And that's why it's necessary that the maftir, the maftir is the person who's going to read the Haftarah, has to recite the Torah reading first. In other words, the rabbis were very deliberate, and they said that because there's a concern that you're going to give equal kavod to the Navi and to the Torah, Here's a way to actively demonstrate that you're not giving them equal cover. We will only allow you to read from the Navi after you've read 3 psukim minimum from the Torah. And that's the reason why there's a concept called the maftir. The maftir is not one of the 7 formal aliyahs, but it is necessary simply to demonstrate that the Navi is secondary to the Torah reading. And therefore, the person who's getting that honor called maftir has to first read from the Torah in order to demonstrate the Torah comes first and only Navi is secondary to Torah. Now this sounds really interesting, right? But it seems like a lot of effort to demonstrate that Torah is more important than Navi, and I think I would have known that by myself, unless something else is going on here that we're not really aware of. So keep that in mind. I'm going to take questions a little bit later. I want to get through this text first. And then v'yachar kach b'navi, debameh shemakdim likro b'torah, aneroim degedoli hi haTorah mehanavi, v'lochein yivarech hamaftir gam kein zayin brachas keneged zayin shekara b'torah. And it's for that very same reason that the maftir has to recite a total of 7 brachos when he reads the Haftarah to correspond to the Torah reading itself. So Simi, how many brachos do you count?
After brachos?
After brachos? 4?
Yeah.
One before. Oh, one before.
I'm saying.
And then there's one before.
It's 5.
It's 5. So where do we get 7?
The 2 from after. The before and after maftir.
Could be that that's how you get it. The Meforshim grapple with that, but I think that what they say is that if you take the 2 into account, there's also another creative way of looking at it. Is that if you look at al haTorah ve'al ha'avoda, ne'eman as a separate bracha, which it's really not, so then it could be counted as a separate bracha and count that as well. Okay. That's really not the major focus. Maybe we'll do a separate shiur on the brachas of the Haftarah at another time. Now I'm going to let you in on a little secret. There are a number of things, and I may get put into cherem once again for something that I say on camera, but there are a number of things that Chazal, or the commentaries to Chazal, say are mipnei hashmad, because of shmad. Later scholars tell us that in many instances, when commentaries say that something was instituted because of shmad, it's because they don't know the real reason. And the only reason that they can come up with is because of religious persecution. I'm not saying that that's true in all instances. It could be that this actually happened. But we have no historical record of a shmad where Jews were not permitted to read Torah publicly, but they said, well, can we read from Isaiah? Go ahead. I mean, think about it for a second. The Bible, for a shmatter, it shouldn't make a difference whether it's Deuteronomy or Isaiah, should it?
Are they reading in a cloth or from a book? And if they're reading from a book, why don't you just read the Torah from a book instead of from a cloth?
Well, consider this, Harold. I mean, we're talking about a time probably, could be even before books were even existing. Certainly before the printing press, but even without that.
How does
books,
know if you're reading from the Chumash or you're reading from the Navi on a cloth?
So they had educated people who could understood Hebrew. There must have been. I'm just saying that it just sounds a little strange. Your Highness, we will no longer read from the Pentateuch. Do you mind if we read a little Ezekiel or Jeremiah? Joshua? Go ahead. Okay? In other words, like, what is going on here? Right? Okay. So the whole flavor of this is the whole tam is somewhat suspect. Just to give you just another example, in doing research for a paper that I wrote when I was in a program. Why do we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad in the Kedusha at Musaf on Shabbos? So, some very obscure early commentary said it was because of Shmad. Right, I've spoken about it before. Because we couldn't say Shema in the morning, so we waited until they left, and then we said Shema Yisrael. And it's also a little bit bizarre. They hire these guards to come to the synagogue. They say, okay, what time do you finish services? We finish about 11:30. 11:30? Are you crazy? I'm going home at 10.
And that's a basis for
It's the same thing
sure.
with shofar.
Right?
It's the
And
same thing with shofar, no?
Yeah.
It's in Musa.
Okay, I'm telling you that anytime you find institutions that are based on shmad, you have to be a little bit suspect, just a little bit suspect, that maybe there's something else going on. Thematically, when you look carefully at why we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad and Musav, there's very good reasons that have nothing to do with Shema. That's not a shiur for now. There's a book called Sefer HaTishbi. It is written in the early 1600s. I had heard of the Sefer HaTishbi, but I didn't know who wrote it. It was written by a rabbi whose name was Rabbi Eliyahu Bachur. Why was he called Rabbi Eliyahu Bachur? That was not his last name. And by the way, he wasn't a bachelor either. That would be another reason. He wrote a book on Dikduk called The Bachur. And so from then on, and why did he call it Bachur? Because it contained fresh information and it was important. And so the word Bachur means like really, really important, something really important. You just have to do a Wikipedia, which is drawn from, of course, the Jewish Encyclopedia online. But his name was Elia Levita, Eliyahu ben Asher Halevi Ashkenazi, also known as Elijah Levita, Elias Levita, Eli Levita, Elia Levita Ashkenazi, Eliyahu HaBachur, was a Renaissance Hebrew grammarian, scholar, and poet. He was the author of the Bava Buch, the most popular chivalric romance written in Yiddish. Living for a decade in the house of Cardinal Egidio de Viterbo, that's a little strange for a rabbi to be living in the residence of a cardinal. He was also one of the foremost tutors of Christian notables in Hebrew and Jewish mysticism during the Renaissance. He was a protected Jew, exactly. At 70 years of age, Levita left his wife and children and departed in 1540 for Isni, accepting the invitation of Paul Phagius to superintend his Hebrew printing press there. And there's a whole entry on Phagius and who he was. Interesting story there too. During Elia's stay with Phagius, he published the following works: Tishbi, a dictionary focusing on words that don't appear in the Aruch, containing 712 words used in Talmud and Midrash, with explanations in German and a Latin translation by Phagius. Sefer Meturgeman, explaining all the Aramaic words found in the Targum. Shemot Devarim, an alphabetical list of the technical Hebrew words, and a new and revised edition of the Bachur. While in Germany, he also printed his Bavo Buch. On returning to Venice, Elia, in spite of his great age, he worked on editions of several works, including David Kimchi's, that's the Radak's Michlol, which he also annotated. He died in 1549 in Venice, aged 80 years. He has descendants living today, including former Prime Minister David Cameron, who describes him as my forefather Elijah Levita, who wrote what is thought to have been the first ever Yiddish novel. Interesting. I just thought that was interesting.
Jewish.
David Cameron certainly has Jewish roots. I don't know if he's halachically Jewish today, but he's from Zera Yisrael. That seems to be clear.
If he's living in Buckinghamshire, no.
Now, so you might ask the question, well, you know, there were a lot of very obscure characters who wrote Svarim in medieval Jewish Europe. Why should we follow this sefer? So the answer is that in about 2006, a new version of the Bachur was published, which contains haskamos from the Gedolei Gedolim of yesteryear, including the Pri Megadim, who says that everything that you find in Sefer Bachur is accurate and correct and should be followed. So it's on that basis that we can use this as a reliable source, and it could be that this is what the Bach was referring to. So the Tishbi writes as follows: V'hinei echtov lecha mahi sibas haHaftorah kifi ma shematzasi kasuv. I'll tell you why we read a Haftarah on Shabbos and Yantiv, based on what I found written somewhere. We don't know where. Sha'antiochus harasha melech Yavan gazar al Yisrael shel yikru b'Torah berabim. Antiochus, now we have a name of the evil emperor. Goes back to the story of Hanukkah, right? So he decreed that the Jews could not publicly read Torah. Ma osu Yisrael. Lakhu parsha echos minivim she'inyan adoime le'inyan mashakasa b'parsha shel Shabbos hahu. They took a parsha from the Navi that resembles in some way thematically or otherwise the weekly Torah portion. V'hamashal b'Shabbos Bereshis, and just to give you an example on Parshas Bereshis, Karu ko amar hakel Hashem borei hashamayim. That so says the Lord who creates heaven, right? Like it says in Yeshaya. Well, the Parshas Noach, Karu Parshas Kimei Noach Zosli, also in Yeshaya, reference to Noach. V'chein kol parsha u'parsha, ve'ata af shebat lahagzera, minug hazeh eino batel, ve'arayom korin osan ha-parshio shel neviim achar kriyas ha-Torah, v'nikra Haftara lashon hafsaka. Now, we haven't explained why it's called Haftara. A lot of people mistakenly think that it's Torah and Haftarah, right? It's like, Haf must mean the thing that you go out for Kiddush for. That has to do with the Torah reading, right? No, that's a joke. But Haftarah means like after the Torah. So maybe that's what Haftarah means. It's clearly not the case because it's with a letter tet, not with a letter taf. So what does the word Haftara mean?
Explanation. No.
Does it mean explanation? Well, the Sefer HaTishbi writes, Lashon Hafsaka. This is when we stop. Now, he doesn't explain this. If we have time tonight, I'll give you the full rundown on what Haftara means. But first, before we get into the explanation of the word Haftara, let's just get back to the reason. So far, we've only seen one reason. It was because of Shmad, according to the Bach. Now we have a name of the Shmader, Antiochus, the very famous Shmader from the times of Hanukkah. And that's the reason for reading Haftara. In that newly published Sefer HaTishbi from 2006, there's a set of hashmatot, basically annotations at the end of the book. And one of those annotations is from the Sefer Nefesh Chaya, is one of the Achronim. I'm not sure whether it's 18th or 19th century, I didn't check. But he writes as follows. Bahagahosai Latishbi Hevesi Sheniskan Benigud Litzdukim. Now we have reason number 2. He writes, I wrote margin notes to Sefer HaTishbi, which I've now collected and put in as part of my major work called Nefesh Chaya. And in this book, in this note, I wrote that in reality it was not because of Shmad that we read Haftorah, but rather was a polemic against the Sadducees, the Tzdukim. That what? Shahayu omrim neviim uchesuvim einan Torah. They claimed that Nach is not part of the official canon of the Jewish Bible. Ayin Tanchuma. Take a look at Medrash Tanchuma. Now, what is he referring to? That's source number 6. We'll put your finger on that line in the Hashmatos in source 5. Take a look at the Medrash Tanchuma. Medrash Tanchuma says in Parshas Re'eh, Kishaba Asaf Hischil Omar Ha'azena Ami Sorasi. Asaf was one of the composers of Sefer Tehillim, like Mizmor LaAsaf. So he says, in Tehillim Ayin Ches, he says, listen, my nation, to my Torah. V'chein Shlomo Amar Kilekach Tov Nasati Lachem. So, and Shlomo also says, I've given you a beautiful piece of merchandise, which is Torasi, my Torah. So Amru Yisrael la'asaf v'chiyesh Torah acheresh ata omer hazina ami Torasi. The people said to Asaf, they said, why are you telling us to listen to your Torah? We already kvar kibalnuha mehar Sinai. Like, what does it mean, your Torah? What, we already have a Torah. It's our Torah. We accepted the Torah. Why are you saying it's your Torah? It's our Torah. Amar lahem poshe Yisrael omrim shahanavim v'haksuvim einan Torah ve'enam ma'aminim bahem. So he said to them, because Poshe Yisrael, sinners, claim that Nach, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim are not part of the official canon. Shenamar v'lo shamanu b'kol Hashem Elokeinu loleches b'sarasav asher nasam lefanenu b'yad avadav hanevi'im. As it says in Daniel, that we did not listen. The generation of Daniel are confessing their sin and said, we didn't listen to the voice of Hashem to walk according to his statutes that were given to us on behalf of his prophets. Harei shahanavim ksuvim toraheim, lekach nemar hazena ami torasi. So you see that Nach is part of Torah, and that's why he said, listen to my Torah. In other words, he was trying to say, don't be like the scoffers, don't be like the heretics who don't accept Nach, but rather you shall accept Nach. So says the Sefer Nefesh Chaya, that these were Karoim, or these were Tzedukim, who who used to claim that Nach is not part of the official canon. It doesn't have any special substance to it religiously, and therefore you don't have to accept it. And Lizos, and then we go back to the commentary. Lizos cholku chashivos lenevim uchsuvim lahafter b'shachus u'mincha lefi minhagam v'herachti b'makom acher. And that's why they added it to the Torah reading in Shacharis and Mincha, depending upon the time and the place. And I've already expounded upon this elsewhere, which I don't know where that is. V'al pizeh yuvnu divrei haramban b'tshuvaso muva'as b'veis Yosef ayin sham. And based on that, we can understand the words of the Ramban, which are quoted by the Beis Yosef. Now, we saw the Ramban quoted in very brief by the Ramah. But what does it mean that based on this we can understand the Ramban? So let's just go back and remember, what did he just tell us? He told us that the Tzedukim, the Sadducees, who did not accept Torah Sheba'al Peh, also did not accept the legitimacy of the holiness of the Nevi'im and Ksuvim. By the way, our Haftorahs are comprised of Nach, correct? Do you agree with that? Yes, no?
Yeah.
No, they're not.
Most is
They're comprised of Na. They're not comprised of Nach.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so according to this reason, we would have expected something from Eov, something from Mishlei, right? But we don't have that as in any of our Haftorahs, right? We only have Nevi'im, we don't have Ksuvim. The question is why? If it's to counteract the Tzedukim, so, or if it's according to the first reason because of Shmad, why not have Nevi'im and Ksuvim comprising our collection of Haftorahs?
Well, didn't they not read the Megillas at the time?
But that's not Haftarah. Megillah is a limited set of Megillas. Those are Megillas. Okay, that's a separate takana. We're not. Our shir tonight is not about Kriyat HaMegillah. We have to find out what the source for that is. Okay. Comes along. So let's take a look. What does the Ramban say? What does the Ramban say? So by the way, this is not really the Ramban. There's a separate sefer called Shailos Utshuvas Harashba HaMeyuchasot LaHaramban. They were originally attributed to the Ramban, but they were actually written by the Rashba. Okay, so it's a very short shut. It's in source number 7. It's Siman Kuf Tzadi Tes. Sheila Hakefarim Asher Saviv Oseinu Nahagu HaYehudim HaShochnim B'Socham Levarech Al Kriyas HaTorah HaKsuva B'Kuntreisim Ke'in Sfarim Shalanu. Here's the problem: we have small little villages outside the big city that do not have their own Sefer Torah. What do they have? They have Torah text that's bound like the way our books are bound. And Vishalu im hi bracha levatola. Can we make a bracha on the Torah reading from these books that are not in scroll form, that are not in cloth? And furthermore, they read the Haftarah in those villages, just like we do in the big city, but even though they don't have a Sefer Torah. And so they've asked me to place this question to you, O Rebbe. Please tell us what the law is. Tshuva. Here's the response. Ein korin b'tzibor ela b'sefer Torah ha'asui kehogen ketikno. V'afilu tos echas posel bo. So, as you would have expected from our knowledge of Hilchas Sefer Torah, you cannot have a public reading of a Torah unless it is written according to the halachic requirements of what a Sefer Torah is. Even if there's one letter missing from a kosher Sefer Torah, you can't read from it publicly as part of the Kriyas HaTorah. And so therefore, certainly not a book. V'afilu mila sheniris kishtayim posabo. And even if you just have, every word is written, every letter is there, but you have one word that has a gap in it to make it look like two words, that also will make the Sefer Torah puzzle. And not only that, but even if everything looks kosher, but the cloth was not manufactured l'shem ksiva Sefer Torah, that also will passel the Sefer Torah. This is all uchidisa b'maseches sofrim, and this is all quite explicit in Maseches Sofrim. V'lo re'isi laharich bazeh shahadavar pashut. And I therefore don't even need to expound on this in any length because it's quite explicit and obvious. But here's the kicker. He says, "V'likros Haftara b'makom she'ein sefer Torah, perush shelo koru b'sefer Torah asur." And therefore, to read a Haftarah in one of those villages where they don't have a kosher or sefer Torah, you also cannot do. Shelo niskana ela achar kriya sefer Torah b'sheyikra b'Torah v'achar kach b'navi. Because the whole reason why they instituted it is so that it should be read after a kosher sefer Torah is read publicly. And if therefore you didn't have a kosher or sefer Torah, you can't read the Haftarah. Okay? Everyone clear on that so far? So what is the Sefer Nefesh Chaya when he says, based on what I've just told you, that the whole reason for the reading of the Haftarah is because of a polemic against the Tzdukim? How does that explain the Tshuvas HaRamban? It explains the Tshuvas HaRamban because essentially what the Ramban is saying is that since this whole thing is to demonstrate that Nach is part of the canon, that it really is a vital component of the Tanakh, it has to be conjoined with the Chumash in order to show that it is as holy or has a certain holiness that is part and parcel of that which makes the Torah holy.
But not more important. So
not more important,
like
right, correct. So basically it's that Shuvas HaRamban. Now, certainly, now it adds a little bit of tamtzit, it adds a little bit of tam as to why Chazal were so makpid to make sure that the Haftorah has to be in some way connected to Torah reading, a kosher Torah reading. Because number one, we had the reason of Shmad, and that reason in and of itself was a little bit weak because, okay, so we're going to still read the Haftorah, but make sure that it's always secondary to the Torah. We know it's already secondary to the Torah, so what's the point? The answer is because, again, what we're trying to do is polemicize against the Tzdukim who felt that the Navi has no importance. Now we're making it adjacent to the Torah to raise it in importance, not to minimize its importance. Okay? So we've got how many reasons so far? 2 reasons. We're going to see a total of 4 reasons this evening. It gets more and more interesting the further down the rabbit hole we go. There is a sefer that is published in 1852 by Rav Shlomo Yehuda Leib Cohen Rappaport. It is called Erech Milan. There are 2 books called Erech Milan. They're published around the same time, so it took me a while to figure out what this sefer was. Rav Shlomo Yehuda Leib Cohen Rappaport was the son-in-law of the Shagas Aryeh, and he was also one of the innovators of Wissenschaft des Judentums, where he combined scholarship that was in vogue in the university and combined it with Torah study. This is an early Wissenschaft scholar, and he wrote a book called Sefer Erech Milan, an encyclopedic work to explain many halachic concepts, but he never finished it. So all we have is it only goes through letter Hey or Vav. He never finished it. Fortunately, he uses Haftarta as the word for Haftorah. And he tells us something quite interesting. Take a look in source number 8. He says, V'noda mashakasav hatishbi erich peter. The Sefer HaTishbi is also written in encyclopedic form, using the shorish of Haftorah Pei Tes Reish. Shamatza kasav shantiochus gavzer shelo yikru b'Torah v'lchein karu parsha b'nevim hamisyacheses leparsha shel Torah ad kan. He quotes Sefer HaTishbi, who says that Antiochus was the shmatter and forbade us from learning Torah publicly, so we read Nach. He said, go ahead, go read your Navi. Ve'ein zeh mekor ne'eman. He says, this is not a reliable source. Now this goes back to the controversy about who Rabbi Eliyahu Bachur was. Remember, we mentioned that Elia Levita, or Rabbi Eliyahu Bachur, is somewhat of a controversial figure. I mean, after all, he's living with the cardinal for 10 years, acting as the court Jew. So we don't know. But as I said, Pri Megadim and a host of other poskim find him to be quite reliable. There's a very interesting blog, the Sfarim blog spot, about that in 2006 there were 2, or 2005, there were 2 editions of Sefer HaTishbi published. One containing a certain essay from a rabbi that was not accepted by the Hasidic world, and one that had that taken out, because they wanted to get the most buyership from their consumers. So anyway, so if you're interested more in that, the history of Sefer HaTishbi, take a look there. But according to Rav Rappaport, this is not a reliable Sefer. And he says, therefore, and furthermore, he says, logically, he says, V'imhaya gozer Antiochus al kriyas HaTorah, lo haya maniach likro gam b'neviim. Come on, let's get real, basically, he's saying. He says, if Antiochus doesn't want the Jews to have public biblical readings, he's not going to say, go ahead and read go ahead and read Navi. He's going to say, no public biblical texts.
He's not a Tzduki.
What?
He's not a Tzduki.
Right, but the point is that this is not, yeah, right, exactly. Okay. Viha ikar. So what's the real reason? He says, the real reason, this is reason number 3 in our presentation tonight, Ki ratzu lechabed gam sifrei neviim b'Shabbos. The rabbis wanted to show honor to the Sfarim of the Nevi'im on Shabbos. V'hakriya bahem achar kriyas haTorah haisa ke'ein divrei tochacha la'am. And he says the benefit of that was that this was like the Shabbos drasha. This was like the rabbi's Shabbos drasha, that after the Torah reading, there would be a selection of texts that would contain divrei musar, words of rebuke from the Navi, or words of inspiration from the Navi, that would inspire the nation to listen and do something that they're not doing. And they connected it to the Parsha, but this was the way that the rabbi was able to give forth to the Kahal his words of musar, of tochacha. And Asher bishvil kein hayu nikroim divrei Kabbalah. He says, after all, we know that Chazal say that the words of the Nevi'im are called divrei Kabbalah. What does the word Kabbalah mean? What does Kabbalah mean? Receiving. But that's not the way everyone learns what Kabbalah means. Rashi says, Miloshon kovlim anu aleichem.
Complaining.
Right. We are not so much complaining, but we are admonishing. We are castigating you. We are castigating you for your bad behavior. Ayin Rashi Reish Perek Beis Detainis. Amnam kidei shelo yihiyu be'enei ha'am shavim b'chvoidam l'sefer Torah, but in order that it should not be as important in the eyes of the nation, like we learned before, like the Sefer Torah, hutzrach hakori b'neviim likra od apam gam ma'at psukim b'Torah mi parshas hayom. Same explanation that we saw from the Bach. V'chipsu b'neviim parsha hamityacheset l'parsha shel kriyas haTorah bo bayom, and so they would search. The rabbis who instituted Haftarah reading would search out thematically passages from Navi that were similar to the Parshas HaShavua. The Haparsha Hishal Nevi'im Tirgamu Ba'orech V'Haisa Kavar Ke'ein Drasha. And what would they do? They would provide the Targum of the Haftarah, which means, in other words, the people were largely illiterate. No one had their own Chumash in front of them. They didn't fully understand the words of the Navi, but what they would do is they would, in many communities in the times of the Gemara, they would translate both the Torah reading and the Haftarah reading into Aramaic so the people could understand it. But what was unique about the Haftarah Targum is that it wasn't just a word-for-word translation, but it was an expansion of the words of the Navi, so that the words of Tochacha would be highlighted, and that was like the drasha of Shabbos. It was like imagine if you're part of the what is in the UK, all of the rabbis are part of the rabbinate of the UK. What is that called? The
United Synagogue.
The United Synagogue, right? So imagine you have a united synagogue of all shuls throughout the Middle East. In this period, in Bavel and Eretz Yisrael, all have the same drasha. It's almost like a way of guaranteeing that there's going to be a uniform message to all Klal Yisrael, that on Parshas Lech Lecha, for example, will give a Haftarah message that has, or Parshas Vayera will give a Haftarah message of something that has to do with taking care of your children properly and appreciating the gifts that Hashem gives you, whatever. Ayin Megillah Sham, Hamafter Benavi lo yivchos michaf alaf psukim, lo shana el b'makom she'ein torgaman. Aval b'makom she'ish torgaman poskim afilu b'pachos, Pirush Rashi di'ir ika Torah chatzibor. And that bears out what the Gemara says. The Gemara says you can't have less than 21 psukim of Haftorah, but only if there's no Targum. But if there's Targum, which makes it much longer, so then you can have even less than 21 psukim. And Rashi says because of the tircha. Like imagine if the drasha takes more than 12 minutes, there's pandemonium, right? People go nuts, right? So the Haftarah has to take less than the time it gives to give a drasha. Yeah, right.
We have a Targum Onkelos, which is the Targum of the Torah, and we know that's what they read.
Yeah.
What happened to this Targum?
So he says, "Uva Maseches Sofrim, b'medvar mamun b'shlo tirgum uv'lo darshu, avol tirgum uv'darshu maftir gimel ohei ozayin ben avi v'day." Okay, 1 second. He says, I'm just skipping down a few lines. He says, "Umavur ki targum v'drasha chadahu lagabi nevim." And by the way, I didn't copy the whole thing, but if you go through that whole essay in this, which is why you can find this on hebrewsfarm.org, if you want to look at the entire entry on, it's a very, very long entry on Haftarta. He goes through a lot of different issues, but he says that the Targum that we have on Nach, which is from Yonasan ben Uziel, in most of the Navi, is not a word-for-word translation. It's a much more liberal translation, and that's part of his argument as to why we can say that the Targum that they had was more like of a drasha type of thing. So we've now seen 3 reasons for the 3 theories, because I'm not even going to call them reasons because no one seems to know for sure. These are theories, these are hypotheses as to why we have a Haftorah reading. Reason number 1 is because of Shmad. Reason number 2 is to counteract the Tzdukim who said that Navi is not holy. Reason number 3 now, from Sefer Erech Milin, from Rav Rappaport in the 19th century, is because what? This was the drasha. This was the way of giving tochacha to the nation, a uniform form of tochacha on every single Shabbos.
I have a problem with that, though, because we're talking about throughout the whole Middle East. So obviously the conditions in one place are not the same as the conditions in the other place.
Granted. So this is suggesting that at some point in Jewish history, there needed to be a uniform message to all communities throughout the known Jewish world, and this would guarantee, perhaps there weren't learned Talmidei Chachamim in every shul, and this would guarantee that every shul would get some kind of Torah message of Musar, of Tochacha, every single Shabbos.
So the question is, what happened to that particular text? Or
No. So he's saying that's the Targum of Yonasan ben Uziel. That's what he's saying.
You don't see that much in the Torah.
Okay, so I'm saying you'll have to look. Maybe I don't remember if he says that maybe that was lost at some point. I'm not sure. Okay, reason number 4, and I think with this, we'll try and finish it with this tonight because it's the Shibbolei Haleket has a fascinating reason. The Shibbolei Haleket is a Rishon, lives I think in the 14th century, 13th or 14th century, and he writes as follows. I think it's the 13th century. He writes, Din Seder Kadisha de Sidra. So the Shibbolei Haleket is not talking about Haftorah now. Shibbolei Haleket in this particular section is commenting on the portion of the Siddur at the end of the weekday Shacharis davening, where we say what's called Kedusha de Sidra, Ashrei Lamnatseach Uvaletzion Aleinu. Okay, the end part of davening. So the commentary of Shibbolei Haleket states as follows: Matzas b'shem Rabbeinu Shlomo Zatzal. I don't know if he's referring to Rashi or not. He says, Minhag Harishonim haya lisho shah echas la'achar tefillah sam kidetnan chasidim harishonim hayushoin shah echas v'chulei. The original minhag, as the Mishnah in Bracha says, that originally pious people used to meditate for an hour after davening so that the words of davening could be properly absorbed into them. An hour before and an hour after. Can you imagine doing that 3 times a day? It's like 9 hours a day of davening.
That's your day, man. So does it just mean...
Right, so that's of course a whole different discussion. I'm just being a little facetious. Al zeh hosifu lomar ashrei yoshevei veisecha kolomar hashoin beveischa kemo vateshvu bekadesh. And that's why ashrei was added at the end of davening, to give praise to those chasidim rishonim who tarry in the synagogue after davening is over. Ashrei yoshvei veisecha. Blessed or fortunate are those people who tarry in your house. Isn't that a beautiful pshat as to why we say Ashrei a second time at the end of davening? Umatzasi b'shem Gaon Zatzal Adam shehispalel im hatzibor v'siyem tfilaso ubala beis hakneses acheres umatza ankorin tehillah leDavid yikra imahin shekain derech haaretz. And they said va'amar Rav Ada bar Ahava b'davar shetzibur oskin bo. Okay, and furthermore he says that it's appropriate that even if you finish davening and you come to another shul and they're holding an ashrei, you should say it with them. Okay, that's a side halacha. Nachzir ledivrei Rabbeinu Shlomo Zatzal. Let's go back to what Reb Shlomo was saying, that this the end of davening. Uvishah shehiyah la'achar tefillah hayamivian sfarim v'korin b'Torah uvenavi uvemishna uvashmuos. That at the end of davening, once davening was over and they were sitting down and meditating, what were they doing? Were they just closing their eyes and humming? I mean, what were they doing? So he says that really what they were doing was they would bring Sfarim and they would read from Torah, from Navi, from Mishnah, all items that are thematic to what to the tefillah. By the way, I forgot to mention just one thing. Rabbi Rappaport says, according to my reason, it also explains very well why we don't have any ksuvim in the Haftarah, why we only have Navi. Because it's only the words of the Navi that are rebuking words. But the words of the ksuvim are not divrei tochacha. Okay, anyway.
Also, the Gemara in Shabbos said that they prohibited the people from learning ksuvim because they wouldn't come to the drasha, to the learning on Shabbos.
Interesting. That's interesting. I didn't think of that. So anyway, so getting back to Rabbeinu Shlomo, he says that at this time after davening, this is what they would be studying. Kidamrina la'olam yashlish adam shnosav shlish b'mikra, shlish b'mishnah, shlish b'talmud kedei l'kaim lo yamish. And that's why our sages tell us you should have a potpourri of study every day that is distributed among different types of text, so that you always have a smattering of everything. Now, they already fulfilled the Shlish Batorah. They already studied Torah during davening because they recited Kriya Shema. Kriya Shema contains the vital components of basic tenets of Judaism contained in the 3 paragraphs of the Shema. But that's why after davening, since they already fulfilled Torah study, they wanted to have Nach study, and so they studied some Nach, or Divrei Nevi'im, after Shacharis. Ula'achar sha'a b'mishnah uvashmius ha-Talmud. And then they would study Mishnah, and then they would study Gemara. The kaven sheribsa ha'aniyos v'hayatzrichen l'maisa yedehen lo yochlu lasok b'Torah kol kach. Here's what happened historically. Originally, people didn't have to work a lot. So, what did they do? They spent a lot of time in shul after davening. And they would spend a lot of time in the Beis Medrash, studying Navi, Mishnah, Gemara. But then what happened? Aniyus. People said, if I do this, I'm not going to be able to bring food home. Put it on the table. That's my primary responsibility, right? So the entire system changed, and they realized that they could not have this widespread practice any longer of people lingering so long in the Beis HaKnesses. And v'hinichu haTorah b'mekoma zulasi kriya shma sheyesh bo malchus shemayim v'aseres hadibros v'ol hamitzvos osa lo akru. The only thing that they therefore left was, okay, you got to go to work right after davening's over, fine. We'll keep kriya shma in the davening because it contains Torah. We'll keep Aseres Hadibros, which, by the way, most of us do not say anymore, but they kept that. Those are the mainstays of Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim and the commandments, and they kept that. But everything else, they said, listen, people are impoverished, they're not going to survive, so we let them go without the Navi and without the Mishnah and the Gemara. V'alfal pichein hayukorin benavi elu shnei psukim uvolet sion va'anizos brisi. Sheyesh bahen me'ein kriyas haTorah, v'adayin heim kavun b'makom aleinu b'chol yom. So what's the consolation prize? If people are going to have to rush out right after davening, let's keep a semblance of Navi at the end of davening. So they stuck in, after Ashrei, they put in Uvalit Zion, which contains Va'anizos Brisi and Ve'ata Kadosh, Sheftilos Yisrael from the books of Yecheskel and the books of Yeshaya. And therefore, we are sort of preserving the minhag to have Navi Limud after davening. You with me? You with him so far? Okay.
No frills.
Right, exactly.
It's like a no frills Navi study, right? It's like just get in the bare minimum, and then we got to go to work. Okay. Now, and it says it's me'ein kriyas haTorah. There's an aspect of Torah reading in these things, I guess, because they also lay down the foundational principles of Kabbalas al Malchus Shemayim. Uv'Shabbos v'Yom Tov sheyesh bo bittul malacha la'am v'Yom Panai hecheziru ha'atorah liyoshna likros b'Torah u'letarge mi'inyano shel yom. It's on Shabbos that people don't have to run to work after davening, right? That they said, listen, if the original minhag was to learn Navi every day after Shacharis, and people have to run to work, so we had to put an end to that and only limit it to 2 psukim, today is a day when we don't have to work. So therefore, let's add a whole section of Navi so that we can remind ourselves what the original practice was. And that's why we read Haftarah on Shabbos morning. Ve'alkein einanu omrim uvolet Zion goel b'shachris b'Shabbos u'v'Yom Tov shekvar karu b'Navi. Listen to this. And he says, and that's the reason why, out of all the Shacharises of the week, the one Shacharis of the week where we don't say Uvalit Zion at Shacharis is Shabbos morning. Why? Because the whole reason for saying Uvalit Zion was because we didn't have time to read from the Navi. But on Shabbos, when we had time to read from the Navi, we don't need to say Uvalit Zion. When do we say Uvalit Zion? By Mincha. Why? So he says, "Ve'afal pichein omrin oso b'mincha shelo yishtakach b'yamos hachol u'minag avos torahu." He says, listen, we don't need to say Uvalit Zion in the morning. But if people are going to come Sunday morning to davening, they're going to say, hey, yesterday was Shabbos, we didn't say Uvalit Zion, why do we have to say it today? So they said, okay, every Shabbos you should still say Uvalit Zion, but push it to Mincha.
I got a question though. You said Kriya Shema, you had to leave it in because of the tenets, the principles that it has.
Yeah.
Problem is, you have a mitzvah to say of Kriya Shema twice a day anyway.
Okay, but you don't have to...
And being Saimach Gula Tfilah.
Okay. So it could be that his shita would be, but maybe that they didn't say it publicly. It wouldn't have been necessary to say it publicly were it not for this consideration.
Yeah, I understand. But you still have to have being Mafneh Gula Tfilah.
I understand. So maybe people would come to shul after they already said Kriya Shema, and they would say save the last bracha of Kriya Shema for coming to synagogue, and maybe they could do it that way. I don't know. It's a good question. It's a valid question. Come up with an answer. But the point is that the Shibbolei Haleket now provides us with reason number 4 for why we read Haftarah on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. And the reason basically is because this was really the original practice of Chasidim Harishonim, to always learn Navi after davening Shacharis morning.
When you say original, Hasidim, you mean back in the time?
Back in the days of the Mishnah. Back in the days of the Mishnah, and even predating the Mishnah, it seems from the language. Because when the Mishnah says Chasidim Rishonim, it means that even before this Mishnah project was ever put together, this used to be the practice. So who knows how ancient back it goes. Some probably back to Bayesheni. So everyone used to learn Navi, and what do you mean? They would learn only Navi? So yes, he says the Shibbolei Haleket, they had already exempted themselves from Torah study, from Torah text, from Kriya Shema. So therefore, they saved that period of time after davening for learning Nach. They learned Nach, they learned Mishnah, they learned Gemara, and then they went home. But when things got tight at work, they ran out right after Aleinu. Luckily, if they were lucky.
When did they start getting tight at work?
Unless it was after 7 a.m. in which you got to beat the rush hours, you got to run out even a little bit before, right? And then, so what does it mean things got tight?
No, when, because it's a question of when did the transition take place?
I don't know, probably after the destruction of the temple, when, things got very difficult for Jews. Yes, John?
But if you follow the line of reasoning, what about Mishnah and Gemara? So why doesn't Uva, the Sion also include, if you've got a few things in Nevi'im there, add in a kapitel or something like
You also have Targum.
So that's what I was going to say also, what Shmuel just said. Maybe that's the Targum, is that to be able to add in the Torah Sheba'al Peh component, which would be the Targum. Maybe that, yeah.
Is there any,
Could be.
Is there any evidence that Rabbi Rappaport's reason for Haftara was more than aspirational? So, was there in fact a time?
We do say Mishnah.
Was there in fact a time when the translated Haftara was read in every shul with
a Targum?
Yeah, with the Targum.
That much we know, because we know that there was a Targum that was offered for Torah reading.
Yeah.
And the Shibbolei Halakha also says that they would read the Haftorah and read the Targum as well. And the Targum probably is the Torah Sheba'al Peh component, because it also adds a little bit of commentary to it as well. So,
do we have any examples of the Targum?
There's a Targum Yonasan ben Uziel on most of Nach, yeah.
But for a Targum of the Haftara, which
yes,
which more was
yeah. So I'm saying, if you open up a Mikros Gedolos, you can find the Aramaic Targum.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's more stuff here. Where do we get the word Haftorah from? Do we need to have a klaf for Haftorah? We'll save it for next time, because it's already getting late. Mirz Hashem, not next week, I'm going to be out of the country, but in Mirz Hashem in 2 weeks from tonight, so let's save the handouts, okay? Thank you. Okay.
You're going to continue this.
Mirz Hashem, I'll try and continue, yes.